When you have strong morals and ethics, those things ground you. At that point, you have to question, well, were these wars coerced by the money men so that these crowns would be in debt to us?
You're listening to The Brendon Marotta Show.
I was really interested by your book, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about regarding it is how wealthy and powerful people see debt differently than the rest of us do. Because growing up, I was always taught certain things about debt. I was taught you want to avoid debt because the people we knew who were in debt got into debt because they were buying fancy things they didn't need. They were getting big screen TVs and cars and stuff like that. But one of the things I got from your book, and that I've been thinking about a lot recently, is that wealthy and powerful people do not think about debt the same way. So I was curious if you could break down how they use debt and how they think about debt.
Yeah, so you can use debt on consumable goods, but you can also use debt for investments and assets, right? So most people, when they think about debt, they borrow money to buy a house, borrow money to buy a car, and a car we know is a depreciating asset. If it could even be called an asset, it's more of a liability. So, so when we think about how they use it and how they use debt, at the highest level, they use other people's debt.
Right.
But, for the average investor, debt is a means to acquire more wealth. So I can borrow against my current credit situation, financial situation, and use other people's money to create another revenue stream instead of using the cash I have on hand. It also has tremendous tax benefits. Sometimes when you're using your own cash, because if I'm wealthy and I didn't make any money this year, technically you can't tax me because I didn't make any money.
Right.
So. They could also use debt that way to sort of offset expenses or income and revenue.
So in your book, you also talk about how the people who are issuing this debt can use it to gain power over different elements of society.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know what brought you to that concept, what made you decide to write about it, and how it is that you discovered it.
Well, it wasn't necessarily that. What I found was that most people were naive. There's this quote, I forget who it's credited to, but they say, you either know history or you trust the government. You can't do both. So I knew there was something fishy going on, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I started the research, and I just wanted to bring people to a place to show, hey, look, from the very beginnings of this country, we have corruption. Before there's a 1976, before there's a Bill of Rights, before there's a Constitution, there's corruption afoot. And it really starts with the intertwining between banks and war. And I found, where you find one, you always find the other at the elite level.
And how is it that those two go together?
Well, when you think about war, you need money, right? You need provisions. You need somebody to supply resources, right? Even when we go back as far as Rome, and you have Ptolemy and the civil war between Ptolemy and his sister Cleopatra. Ptolemy, he basically petitions to Rome and says, "Hey, we need your help. We need some of your soldiers, right?" So there's always a need for outside resources to help. Well, in war is very expensive, right? You have to pay your soldiers, whether it's land or in coinage or gold or something like that. The materials that are lost, right? So, somebody has to make the swords and the shields, or today the guns and the ammo. So all these things come with tremendous debt. So war creates debt. And when war creates debt, it creates a need for somebody to finance this debt. So I started the book off with the monarchs because I thought the monarchs, and this is where I first had my first inkling something was wrong, and I had no idea it existed, but I knew in the intuition level of my mind that it existed. I just had to find the research to back it up, and I found that the monarchs really didn't have the powers, the money guys that were behind them, and what it just seemed that the money guys always appeared when there was a war to be fought. It's like, so I was like, okay, yeah, here's the connection between money and war. So the funny thing is, you go into debt following a war. So now what do you have to do? You got to borrow money. Who you gonna borrow from? The same, banker. This also has economic repercussions, for the entire nation itself. Let's just stay on the topic of money. So yeah, so it has financial repercussions that are felt throughout the nation, both at the highest and lowest levels of the society. So it seems like the only person that's winning is the guy who has the money, because he's saying, hey, and so then it becomes a situation where, all right, you can have this money, but because I'm the guy that financed the war, right? Finance your side of the war, you owe me something that's bigger than money now. Like, I technically control the crown. Like, you're the king, but you're going to do whatever I tell you to do, right? And it's that power that they wanted, and not necessarily the money. The money was just a means to the power, right? So the throne was purchased without actually having to sit in it and deal with all the dangers of sitting in the throne, right? Because the throne was a very dangerous place. If you know anything about Roman history, it's like, your emperor, there's always somebody that's willing to stab you in the back to be the next one in line, right? Because they were the next one in line or whatever. Same thing with the throne. Your own son might kill you. So it's a dangerous place to be. But what's better than sitting in the throne is controlling it from the outside. So then at that point you have to question, well, were these wars coerced by the money men? Did money men say, hey, let's start a war so that these crowns would be in debt to us? And that's the question that the book puts in people's minds. Now, I don't literally answer that question for them. It's something that people need to think about. But there's a wealth of evidence there to help people research and understand that there could be a correlation.
So that was one of the things I found really interesting, was this idea that the merchant might have more power than the king. Yeah. And I was curious, what prevents the king from taking that power back? In other words, why can't he just say, I'm the king, I have an army, I'm not going to pay this debt, and I'll just, kill these money men? Like, why is it that he can't do that?
Because war. When you have to understand, when you have a nation, you have enemies. So if you have enemies, there's always a potential threat, right? When we look at the Ottoman Empire and their conquest of Constantinople, this is the last vestige of Rome, right? Well, why couldn't Constantinople defend itself? This last capital of Rome. Even with all the help from the church and everybody else, they were broke. They were broke. They didn't have money to pay anybody. They didn't have money to withstand the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire takes over. So it's that threat of the enemy that says, this guy's a pain in my neck, this money guy. He's a pain in my butt. But if he goes, who's going to finance my next war?
So if they kill off the money guy, then the money that they paid to the people who killed the money guy dries up. They can't do that anymore. And the next person who comes along, they're vulnerable to.
The issue is, and you'll see this amongst many monarchs, they weren't very smart and educated people. Not until later on you get, monarchs that are educated. Some of them are illiterate. But who knows money better than the money man? So the other thing you run into is, not only do I have this threat of war, but I have this guy who understands money, right? And he's showing me how to make my nation stronger through money. And he's advising me on money decisions. And this is the guy that's his expertise. It's like saying, oh, the United States should get rid of its financial advisor, right? and maybe we should, or you should replace them. But you can't just destroy the position altogether, right? You know, it's like being a large corporation and not having a CFO. Well, who's watching the money, you know, and who's telling you, you know, how much you should save and how much you should invest? So he loses that too. He loses the intelligence of money, right? So then not only is the threat of money, the threat of war, but there's the threat of money, right? Like, I could go broke now. My nation no longer knows how to make financial decisions. And again, these monarchs weren't the smartest people. They weren't studied people. Most of their time was spent with politics. You know, if it was Rome, the politics between them and the Senate, the people, you know, popularity, right? All of that stuff. So they didn't even have the time to study these things.
It sounds like that the monarchs were in a difficult position of needing someone to advise them on money, but the person advising them on money wasn't necessarily loyal to them.
Right. Yeah, the money guys are always going to be loyal to yourself first. That's just human nature. Most people are going to think about self-interest before anything. So that's where I believe I say it in the book, where I'm not placing blame on the money men. It is human nature to act in self-interest. I think that if more people understood that people are going to do what's good for themselves above and anything else, well, actually the majority of people, then we can start making decisions based upon this self-interest. But again, being a king of a nation, it's a very hard thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to do. So many different distractions and many facets and moving pieces. It's just really hard. Just really hard.
One of the things that comes through in some of the parts of the book is the idea of central banking, and that a lot of these banks weren't necessarily owned by the king. They were something external. And that's another place where I've always, you know, every time I've had someone explain, for example, the Federal Reserve, it's one of those things that sounds like the official story sounds like a conspiracy theory. Like, this can't be true. It can't be how it actually works.
Yeah.
But I'm curious why it is that these monarchs in this position didn't control that aspect themselves. In other words, why didn't they just issue their own currency and become their own bank?
Again, this is something that doesn't make any sense to them. Right? Like, the idea of coinage. And not to say that some didn't. Many did. Right? But you still had someone in that role, a mentor. Right? You'd have the royal mentor. Right? Or the royal treasurer. There was still an individual that oversaw those responsibilities. And oftentimes that was the money man. Right? Like, it's like, hey, look, you're a really rich guy. You became rich. Show me how to do this. And then they sit in that position. So either way, whether you create your own coinage or there's a central bank, you still have a money man handling these things, right? So again, the question goes back to, is he acting in self-interest or is he acting in the benefit of the nation, right? And there's many ways to handle that through psychology, but that's another story for another day. But the idea of central banking, like I showed you in a book, isn't inherently bad. The issue comes from quantitative easing or currency inflation. Fiat itself is actually not wrong as long as you keep a 1-to-1 ratio between the paper currency and specie. It's when you have more fiat than specie, or whatever resource you're backing it with. Let's say it's, you know, the Great Lakes. You can actually create a currency based upon the Great Lakes and the fresh water there, right? You can do that based upon any resource as long as you can back it up 1-to-1, you know, and say, hey, you know, each dollar is worth a gallon, right? Whatever it is, however you're going to measure this thing out. The problem comes when you start doing fractional reserve banking, right? So when we think about today in the United States, you know, I've heard people say that the Federal Reserve practices fractional reserve banking. And then you have other people that say, well, if you talk about that stuff, you know, they're going to come after you and this, that, and the third. Aren't you afraid? And the truth is, they want you to say there's fractional reserve banking because it's not true. In order to have fractional reserve banking, you need to actually have a fraction of the reserve in the bank. The Federal Reserve doesn't even have a fraction of a reserve in the bank. They have nothing. It's not. There is no reserve currency. The reserve currency is dead. It's not backed by anything but the fact that we control the planet. It goes back to the Bretton Woods Agreement. All this stuff hinges on the fact that the United States is the world reserve currency.
I'm curious how much longer that will last, because this past year, I think it's a third of the currency in existence got printed.
Okay.
And 2020, I think, is the year that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously there's massive inflation. I'm curious what you think the outcome of that will be.
Well,
I'm sure you've followed that. Yeah.
Well, if you go by what Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum has written in The Great Reset, they allude to the fact that the only currency that could replace the United States dollar as a reserve currency would be China, right? And they said that's not likely. Then they said the thing that has the most likelihood of replacing the dollar would be a cryptocurrency. And that is a reality. The United States dollar is going to be pegged to, let's just call it Fed coin. And at that point, printing money is even easier. Inflating the currency is even easier. You just add a zero and it's there, right? And they do that now, but there's still this need for physical cash. I kind of like having physical cash. The phasing out of physical cash is a bit bothersome to me, mostly because the blockchain is a ledger and everybody can track your spending. So, if I make a big purchase and, I made a transaction with, let's say some stranger I made a transaction with, well, my Bitcoin or whatever that is can now be tracked through other future purchases, which is why I think privacy coins, which there's plenty of today, are going to be a thing of the future, and what most of the, I would say, based red pill Hotep individuals, that's how they'll manage their money.
We should actually probably define Hotep, because I suspect a lot of my audience is not familiar with that term.
Yeah.
And you just put out a 40-minute documentary online
Yeah.
talking about that idea. So maybe you could give us the 2-sentence logline movie pitch of what that is for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah. So 2 words, self-supremacy and homeschooling. So we believe in the individual and making the individual best. That's self-supremacy. And then we believe in our mission. Our mission is to promote homeschooling throughout America. So, anything outside of that, I would definitely say go to hotepnation.com and watch the videos there. And you'll get a clearer idea of what's going on here. There's 3 videos right on the homepage, including the 40-minute documentary you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I was going to ask about, too. That looked like it was shot at a conference you guys did. Is that right?
Yes.
I pick that up correctly?
Yeah. We had a conference at Ahern Hotel, a wonderful destination in Las Vegas. It's not like the other hotels. The other hotels, you have to hear the ringing of the slot machines and the gambling. This is more like it's on the strip, but the hotel itself is quiet. So when you walk through the lobby, it's just like, serenity, not the ding, 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 So yeah, we had our conference last year. We'll have one this year. And we shot it there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was there an intention behind it, or is there anything you want to share about it, or how it came together?
Everything about Hotep Nation has been 100% organic. And it just sort of coalesced. We knew we were going to do the conference. We knew we had a video guy on the team. So we decided to maximize that weekend and not just party the whole time, but let's get some work done. So we created the Hotep documentary. We created the intro for our show. So we got a lot of work done that weekend.
Going back to the questions about money that your book brings up,
Yeah.
is there a solution to this? Because I see that one of the things that you're doing is you're doing a lot to bring different groups of people together to sort of create your own community. Is that the way to respond to some of the things that are being done to money right now and have been done to it in the past, or is there a different solution of some kind?
Well, I'm going to borrow from the great Thomas Sowell here. There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. Okay. The key is knowledge. Most people are just very ignorant, naive, and outright stupid. You know what the U.S. ranks in education. We don't have to go into those numbers, but I'm sure we can look that up and see how defunct that we are. So we just don't have a thinking society. We don't have a critical thinking society. We don't have a knowledgeable society. We don't have an informed society. And this is where you have to start first. This is the motivation for writing this book, was to inform people. Like, you need to be informed on how this money situation works and how things get passed, and et cetera, et cetera. So, trade-offs. Cryptocurrency. What's the difference between using this and using cryptocurrency? Well, the trade-off is, with cryptocurrency, ain't no bank. That means you're responsible for your money. See, with the bank lose your money. You can say, yo, you better have my money, right? And then the zeros, however many zeros in your bank account, are promised to you, backed by the FDIC, whatever, right? When you got that cryptocurrency wallet and you forget your keys, or you lose your hard wallet, or whatever it is, it's gone. It's gone. Somebody steal it, it's gone. Somebody get access to your keys, it's gone. So like I said, there's Thomas Sowell. There's no solutions, only trade-offs. The thing is, most people don't want the responsibility. You know, for example, when people talk about solutions and what can we do when, you know, the power grab, and the truth is, people don't want the responsibility that comes with independence. People do not want the responsibility that comes with independence. If they did, they'd be independent. They would have their own water source. They would have their own source of electricity. Generators. They'd be off the grid already. If people really want that responsibility, they do it. And there's a lot of people that do. Eduardo Saverin, right? Hopefully I'm saying his name right. You familiar with him?
Yes, the social network co-founder of Facebook.
Yeah. How much money does he owe the United States? IRS.
I have no idea.
You know he bounced, right?
Yeah, he renounced his citizenship.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, people who do that, the IRS will still try to collect taxes 10 years after. But after that 10 years, then you are no longer a citizen, and that's how that works.
Right. So he owes money, a lot of money, and I don't think the IRS is going to let him slide because the amount of money he owes. But he's in Singapore, and he's chilling, and he didn't pay taxes on the hundreds of millions or whatever he made. That's freedom. But that freedom came with responsibility. Right? So anybody in this world can be free. It's just that, are you willing to do the things you have to do to actually be free? You might have to move to Singapore. You might have to renounce your citizenship. Are you ready to do that? Then if you're not, then you'll be subject to the laws of this nation. But you don't have to be. That's a choice you make. You either, take all the good and bad that comes with America, or you leave it alone.
It sounds like a lot of what you're doing with the book and some of the things that you're talking about is bringing that awareness to people that they have the choice. Yeah. I think a lot of people maybe aren't even aware that there is a choice. They just think, well, this is what you have to do, and that they can somehow get one without the other, that they can have the coin without rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, so to speak.
Exactly. And that just comes back to the spoiled nature of the American. They've had it so great that they think everything is supposed to be great, right? We have some of the highest standard of living here in America. Everybody wants to move to America. And the people in America who complain about it like this is the worst place on earth. I would never do that. I love America. Don't get me wrong. I love this place. There's a lot wrong with it, but I love it. But I only love it because of the quality of living, the standard of living. Right? It's wonderful. Some people don't want to give that up, and sometimes you have to give that up to have a little bit more freedom. And like I said, you could start homesteading. It's a little bit different life, though.
Yeah.
You know, the store ain't gonna be, around the corner. It might be 10 miles.
It sounds like even the early monarchs who made deals with people for debt so they could engage in war were in a sense doing the same thing. They were making a trade-off, and they made a choice to be less free, even as a monarch, so that they could accomplish certain things or finance certain things.
Yeah.
Like that trade-off goes back all throughout history.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the problems with being a monarch is maintaining your ego. I mean, you're the man and everybody treats you like it, so managing the ego, I feel, is, and if you read any Young talks about the id and et cetera. I don't make this a conversation about psychology, but there's a lot of psychology that plays a part in being a leader. There's a lot of pitfalls that come with that. Money just happens to be one facet. War just happens to be one facet. But really what you're dealing with is a situation that could turn you to a schizophrenic.
How so?
Just having that position of power. Look at trying to figure out which Roman emperor it was that went crazy. I want to say it was Caligula.
There were a couple.
You see what I'm saying? So you get me.
Yeah.
So, having that type of responsibility. I mean, think about the fact that you can't sleep at night because somebody might stab you. You can't drink every cup of wine, with surety, knowing that it's not poisoned, right? That amount of stress just begins to build up.
Well, one of the most famous examples of that was Claudius, the Emperor Claudius.
Thank you. That's who I meant to talk about. Yes, Claudius.
Who survived, I think it was 6 assassination attempts, and unfortunately there were 7. But he was just super paranoid about it happening, and that's probably why he survived 6.
Correct. So think about that. Like, this is what you have to worry about outside of all your other responsibilities. Oh my God, anybody would go crazy. Any average individual would go crazy. So it takes a tremendous amount of understanding and learning. Like, I think one of the best leaders of Rome was probably Marcus Aurelius. But I mean, this is a guy who had a great environment of understanding, both psychology and political science, the benefits of being at war and being a general. But he probably had it together the most. I've been a victim of this in the past where I had a family member and I gave some of his friends privileges and rights, or I would say privileges over him, because he made an error. So I punished him for that. But since his friends had privileges, so then he went and backstabbed me. Right? But this is family. But if I say, hey, I need you to do something, and then you lose my money and you come back to me like it's just nothing's, like I'm just supposed to forgive you. Like, nah, I got to put you on timeout for a little while, but your friends can make money. Right? And so these are the things you have to worry about. Like, how do you deal with the relationships with family and friends and jealousy and envy? Jealousy and envy will take out any leader. So you have to manage all of that.
It sounds like this family member did not see your assistance as a privilege, but was perhaps entitled to it.
Correct.
They saw it as a right rather than a privilege.
Right. So it comes back to what is the frame in which you began that relationship with, right? And that's where I made a mistake. Anytime you're dealing with somebody, you have to set a standard. You have to set a foundation for that relationship and how that relationship is going to move forward, especially when there's times of change. There's a discussion that needs to be made. If such and such occurs, here's what's going to happen, right? And da-da-da-da. If these things aren't explained when you act, people are like, "But why are you doing this to me?" No, we discussed this, and even you might still run into problems, even though you discuss these things, etc., etc. But it's being leader is very hard.
It's interesting to hear you mention that frame stuff in the context of leadership, because it's making the sort of gears turn in my own mind about some areas where I'm like, oh, I need to proactively set the frame. There's areas where I'm thinking, oh, I have a frame in my mind, but I haven't communicated that to the people I work with. I'm just sort of assuming, because it's obvious to me that that's the frame. It's not necessarily obvious to them. And frame control, hold on, I think I have it here. Frame control, I think, is a theme of one of your other books, the Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity.
Right.
So perhaps you could break that down too, because frame is a way of thinking about relationships, maybe is something that a lot of people aren't aware of sort of pre-framing what the relationship is going to be.
Absolutely. One of my favorites that I've learned over the years about frame is, when I was younger, I was very much a comedian, happy-go-lucky, outgoing, especially in my initial interactions with people. Now, my initial interaction with people is very serious, because I don't want them to take me as a joke, and I don't want to start a joking relationship with them, and I don't want them to not take me serious. Because what happened was, when I used to start my relations with people, it would start off with, you know, hey, I'm just a funny guy, jokey. And then when I'm serious, everybody's like, who is this guy? Right? Like, who is a serious person? So I reversed it to where it's now, if you get to see the comedy side of me, then that's pleasurable, right? You're like, oh, wow, he's funny, he's cool. But I set the frame with being serious going forward. I might still make an initial interaction. I'll make lighthearted comments to lighten the mood, but then I just go back to my stern face and back to serious conversation. And I try to make that the majority of my interactions with people. Also, you can also set the frame with other people by what you don't do. For example, let's say there's 3 people in a room, I'm one of them, and the other 2 guys make an off-color joke about another individual. Well, there's probably 3 main ways to handle that. One is to laugh along. Another one is to say, hey, that's not cool. And another one is to not react at all. I love not reacting at all because it puts a question mark on their mind. Now they're wondering, which side of this thing is he on? Did we offend him? Da-da-da-da. And that's much better than letting people know where you stand. Keeping a question mark in their mind keeps people on their toes. So I much prefer that route. So when I hear people joking, even if it's not off color, I might not even laugh. I'll just be stone-faced, simply because I want them to take me as a serious individual. So I think, again, I have this phrase where I say, if you want to know anything, know yourself. So you have to know yourself and know what you want people to expect of you. You want to know what you want people. You want to set expectations for your reputation. So if I say to myself, I want people to take me serious, then I have to be a serious person.
That's a really interesting piece of wisdom about the order with which you present aspects of yourself. That if you present the joking aspect first, that in some way that pre-frames the serious aspect, whereas the serious aspect can also pre-frame the joking aspect, where it's like, oh, he's a really, smart, serious person, but he's also down to our level and can joke with us, whereas the reverse is, what's this goofy guy trying to be serious for?
Correct.
And I it's funny because I've noticed I've done the opposite at times where, especially when I've been doing documentary work, I will downplay my own level of thought and focus, because I've noticed that when I interview people, that allows me, that people talk more when they're the expert in the room and there's not 2 experts in the room.
Right.
That actually draws out a different side. And now I'm starting to get ready to put out a book, and I may need to present myself as the expert for that.
Okay.
So I would be curious to know from you, is that something I should change up? Is there a way that I should,
it's circumstantial,
frame that differently?
It's circumstantial. In that case, it seems to be beneficial, because you're the interviewer. You want the other person to feel like the expert in the room. I do the same thing when I interview. I think that's perfectly fine. Maybe in a boardroom setting, that's not the best idea. Right? You want to be the expert or a expert in the room. But in a situation where you want to bring the best out of someone else, self-deprecation always works.
By the way, people may not know that just from this interview, but you do have an incredible sense of humor. And one place I see it really come out is in this award show that you put on called The Grifties.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about what the solution is to various things around money. I think the Grifties is a great celebration of things which are not the solution. And so I was curious how that came about, and then also how is it that you define the term grifter, because that's something that comes up a lot in online political discussions.
Yeah, so it started as Hotep's been told you. We have our Thursday podcast, and that's just pure comedy straight through and through. And I think something that I realized was I want to say like maybe 2009 Twitter, I was following like Alex Jones really hard, and I was all about the conspiracies and food poison, the food supplies being poisoned, all these different things, right? So one day somebody says to me, a friend, and they said, your account just puts me in a bad mood because I'm just like so scared like the world's gonna end because I'm consistently reporting all this bad news.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit, I'm no better than the news, right? Because another thing I say is one of the main things the news wants to do is put you into a fear mind state. So I adjusted it and I said, how do I bring people awareness but keep them happy? And I said, we can just deliver this stuff through jokes. I know how to do jokes. So I find ways to take the most destructive events around the world and make them funny. It's like the laugh to keep from crying situation. So that's what Hotep's been told you is about. That's what the Grifties is about. Let's laugh about these things and let's not let them get us down, because at the end of the day, all these events are inconsequential. What really matters is the relationship with yourself and the relationship with your family, and then the relationship with your friends. What really matters the most is the relationship with yourself. You build strong individuals, you have a great society. Strong mentally, strong physically, strong spiritually. So focus on that, and everything else will fix itself. So when we use the term grifter, we use the term grifter lightly. But it's just like the Force in Star Wars, okay? You got the good side and you got the bad side. So we joke and we say, we're the light side of the grift, right? So let's say right now Joe Biden, has a gaffe, right? I could make a funny joke on Twitter about the gaffe and get thousands of retweets, or I could ignore it. The fact that I know I'm going to get engagement is a grift, right? I'm just like, I'm kind of like grifting off of this situation. And I do it sometimes, right? Because, it's funny. I need some engagement. I might need a couple of extra 1,000 followers, whatever it may be, right? Sometimes I do it by accident. I'm like, I didn't even mean to do that. And just the tweet just blows up, right? Like that happened to me last week. I tweeted something and just blew up, and I got like 1,000 followers. And I'm just like, okay. Then there's the dark side of the grift. And the dark side of the grift is basically selfish, right? Everything you do, you don't care about how other people are going to feel about what you say. Now, there's a lot of times where I express myself where, hey, this is the harsh truth and I don't care how you feel about this. But I think it's different based upon the type of language you use. I think sometimes the grifters will say things that they know will just inflame an entire segment of the population, right? And then with their high profile, it just makes it even worse. And I think that could go against even our own agenda sometimes. And then, there's other parts of the grift where there's, omission of the truth. So that's that type of grift. But it usually comes down to the fact that it's selfish. I have a new book I'm writing right now, and there's an entire chapter dedicated to the grift. So, people are going to get the whole breakdown of it all. But that's pretty much the gist of it, man. You got good grifters and you got bad grifters. The bad grifters are just in it for themselves. The good grifters are like, hey, guys, look, like myself, like I would consider myself a good grifter. Like, I'm not going to just hop on the internet and just talk about like Kim Kardashian and, all these things that don't matter. If I'm a griff, like, let me teach you in the process, right? Let's learn something. Let's come to more solutions for things, right? And figure out, how do we make this world better? And let's talk about those things. So that's what I would call like the good side of the griff. Whereas the bad side of the griff also was just like they focus on the fear stuff so much, right? Like, oh, Democrats are bad or Republicans are bad. And they just do that all day. And it's just really like antagonizing. And it's just like, all right. So you guys don't like each other. You guys are the same, but you don't like each other. That's totally fine. It's like, two sisters in a room fighting. And also in my book, I'm going to be talking about how there's no such thing as a right and left. It's the same thing. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask if we could get a preview of the upcoming book, if you could tell us what it's about, because I'm always curious what you're working on.
It's a roadmap to dealing with our society. So I'm breaking down the different power structures and how we interface with them. And then, I don't know, actually. I don't know. Because I'm still writing it. Right? I don't know
fair.
Where this is quite going. I have some things outlined. We're going to talk about race. We're going to talk about the power structures. We're probably going to talk about media. I don't know. I know in my outline so far, I got to talk about grifters, and grifters is just becoming a long chapter. Because it's just so important. And then I'll probably talk about race and whoever, maybe I'll touch on economics, but I'm writing economics books in the future, so I don't know how much I want to touch on economics in this one. So, we'll see.
I'm curious what your writing process is, actually, because I'm at the end of one book that I just finished writing, and I'm about to start another. So,
well, the Patriot Report was a research project, and I don't think I'm ever going to do any one of those again.
Mine had a lot of research in it too, so I sympathize.
It's just too much work, with not enough upside, right? It doesn't balance out the amount of work to the amount of impact it'll make in the world. I don't think evens out, right? Also, I think the research stuff is too intellectual for many. Like Patriot Report is very intellectual; it's just all facts, right? Yeah. Just like not a moment in the book where there's not some fact, quote, or citation, right? So it can turn out to be a boring read. So the next one next two actually are just going to be brain dumps. And I find brain dumps to be more important and more enjoyable for me because that's what I do best is play the role of today's philosopher, like a prophet, I guess you can say, and proselytize or whatever. But, it's an opportunity for me to get on my soapbox and explain things from my point of view as opposed to, here's this boring research that I found, and here's some facts that you need to know. I love the Patriot Report. I do a presentation on it. I'm doing a presentation on it today, but I do a presentation on every chapter. I love it. When I do the presentation, it makes the information way more fun because I get to laugh at all the things that the founding fathers were doing. So there's a lot of banter that goes into it. But, when you're reading the book, if you're not like really into the information and not interested in knowing like the conspiracy, it's probably like a boring read. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that when you do a presentation on it, that you pepper it with commentary and jokes about the things the founders were doing.
Yeah. Because
the book is definitely factually focused. And I think that I was probably more familiar with the things that you've done online than the writing that you've done. And I actually really liked that aspect of it, that it was very serious and fact-based. And you mentioned earlier, you're talking about pre-framing different things. That was something where I felt like I got to see another side of you, because my previous familiarity was with some of the sort of political stunts you've done, some of the online commentary and things like that. And so seeing like, oh, he has this really intellectual research he can do too. That's super interesting. And then also just the topic was one I was interested in. So I liked that aspect of it. But I also just, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You also just what?
Well, I was also going to say, I just got done writing a book that deals with academic theory. So I like that writing. Like I I do feel like after doing a research book that I could do another research book again at some point, because I actually enjoy that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that I'm probably in the minority in that
Yeah.
respect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I have a system to do the research book, and I do have other research books I have to write, like the one on economics. I think I'm going to do it different this time. I think I'm actually going to internalize the information, and whatever comes out in the brain dump will be in the brain dump, and I'll cite where I see citations, but it won't be like the Patriot Report where it's like citation, fact. Because I just feel like it just doesn't work with my mission, right? My mission is to get people moving, right? Get people thinking. So I think my next book might be a little bit different, more of a blend between, because this one has no rhetoric, right? Very little rhetoric. And I didn't want to add any to this, because when you add rhetoric, it takes away from the facts. Because people go, wait, what's the fact? Is it the fact, or is it what you think? And sometimes you get books with a few facts and a whole bunch of rhetoric, and now the person has to decipher out of this book what's fact and what's rhetoric, right? And sometimes when you're reading the material, the monkey mind doesn't know the difference, right? The conscious mind has to decipher, okay, this was a quote, this was a factoid, this was a statistic. But when you're reading, and sometimes when you regurgitate information, you might regurgitate something that's somebody else's rhetoric. So when I created the book, I said, I only want facts. And if somebody accidentally repeats something, they're repeating it fact. But yeah, the funny thing when we talked about frame is the Hotep Jesus brand frame was completely backwards to my intention today, right? Like it starts off with the Starbucks Stunt, right? So the frame is, who's this jokey guy? So then how do you bring the intellectualism into it, right? So people don't know that about me. They just go, oh, here's this funny Starbucks guy. And the same thing on Twitter. I just used to always joke on Twitter. And now I don't. And people are like, yo, where are you at? And I'm like, I don't want to make people laugh anymore. I have to change the frame on my brand. So I stream 5 days a week now, and I just do presentations on everything. And then now people are like, yo, this is some of your best work. And I'm like, no, well, yeah, it is. But they're surprised. People just are surprised that I am an intellectual. And I think it's because they've never sat down and watched my interviews, because they didn't expect intellectualism. They were like, oh, he did an interview with such and such, he's probably telling jokes, right? But once people get tuned with the fact that, no, I am a part of the intellectual class, then I'll be in the right place with my brand.
That's really interesting. So most of my audience probably does not even know what the Starbucks Stunt is. Should we tell them, or should we just move on and they can look it up if they want?
Yeah, let's move on. They can look it up if they want.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I find that interesting too, because I think a lot of people, when they're building any kind of following in media, are focused on how do I get attention, not necessarily what type of attention do I want. And it sounds like you were really successful at getting attention, and then had to rethink, wait, where do I want this attention to go? Even, if it's on me, like what aspect of me do I want to get this attention?
Yeah.
And we're willing to reinvent yourself, which I also think a lot of people, this is the sort of, this is probably the reason I have never been as grift focused, let's say, as I know that I could be, because saying the same thing over and over again is just not interesting to me. Every now and then there's an event in the news, and I know
that's the bad side of the grift.
Yeah. Like I could get that attention, but it's kind of boring.
It's very monotonous. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm curious, what do you think the process is to shifting the attention you're getting, or reinventing yourself in some way? Because it sounds like
consistency.
You've probably done that more than once.
Branding equals consistency. I teach marketing and branding, and branding equals consistency. Whatever you do consistently, what people will consider to be your reputation, and branding equals reputation plus consistency.
Sure.
So that's what branding is: consistency plus reputation. And the consistency creates your reputation. So, for example, what I said in the very beginning was, and I did this consciously, I didn't know it then, but I was unsure of how I wanted to be perceived. Just wasn't a thought. I didn't care. Like, it just wasn't a thought of, hey, how do I want to be perceived? It was just like, no, people got to know about me. right? The Starbucks stunt was not planned, okay? Something happened in the news. The idea immediately came to me. I wasn't going to leave the house that weekend. I leave the house that weekend, go to the mall, with the fam, fiance like, yo, let's go to the mall. And usually I'm like, nah. I went. Then we're sitting down, taking a break, and there's a Starbucks right there. And I'm like, I had that idea. So it was sort of like spur of the moment. And then it goes viral, and I'm on Fox News and all these crazy things. So it wasn't intentional, but it was intentional. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like I just was like, oh, I'm going to make the news after I do this. It was just like, no, this is just a stunt for like me and my, several thousand followers, right? It was just a fun joke between us, and it just blew up. But I wasn't thinking about the branding aspect and how I'll be perceived and et cetera, et cetera. It was always about, let's grow these numbers, right? We got to take, I think I was at maybe like 30,000 followers or 50,000. And I was like, we got to get 100,000. And then I hit 100,000. It's like, we got to get to 200,000, right? And now I'm at 200,000. It's just like, all right, the numbers don't matter anymore. I got the numbers. It's like before, I thought that after I hit 200,000, the next goal would be like 1 million or 500,000. And then in hindsight, it's just like, all right, screw the numbers. Let's get back to branding and marketing. And because I think I have enough numbers now. and it's more.
You're doing depth now.
Now I'm adding the depth, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always felt like the numbers were most important. And looking back, I don't think I would change anything.
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of what does go viral on social media is something that often isn't the defining thing of the person who did it. I did a little short documentary about basically one of my dad's blog posts making the news and winding up in the Drudge Report, and he had the same thing. He was on Fox Business and all these different things. And it was, I guess a case of the media taking something very small and then turning it into a big thing because they found the right way to frame it and found a funny headline for it. But I think that it is often something random like that. And a lot of the time people unintentionally go viral on social media. And it sounds like for you, there was a little bit of intentionality, but you were always kind of trying to do interesting things on social media to make people think or to get attention or things like that.
Yeah.
And now it's a little more intentional and not the intention has shifted from expanding following to creating depth with the people who follow you.
Correct. Exactly. Now it's just time to 300, right? The movie 300. You could come with Xerxes' army and all these people, but they ain't beating these 300 on this terrain. You know what I mean? I forget the name of the guy.
You're training your Spartans.
Yeah. Well, it's not really about training the Spartans. It's more or less about having high quality people, right? Like, I have 200,000 followers, but how many of those are high quality? I would much rather lose 100,000 followers overnight and have 10,000 Spartans than to have 200,000 followers and only 100 Spartans. You know what I mean? 1,000 Spartans ready to die for the Hotep nation. Yeah, I'd love to have that over having 200,000 followers.
What do you think the key is to creating that depth and finding also those people who are really skillful and who are like, oh, this is someone I would stand against Xerxes' army with, so to speak?
You can't be a basic bitch. The basic bitch rhetoric attracts basic bitch attention, people, right? So again, going back to the dark side of the grift and the positive side of the grift. The dark side of the grift is basic bitch tendencies. They stick to the same 3 talking points. They say it over and over again. And these basic bitch grifters, they'll get the big stages and all that stuff. But everybody there is basic bitches. So it's just basic bitches hanging out with basic bitches. If you really want to get that hardcore audience, you got to add that depth and that intellectualism. And that's why I do these hour presentations Monday through Friday, right? And now people are like, oh, I got to show up. Class is happening right now, right? And then you're empowering people with information. But then also the other powerful people in the world see you at their level. and they're like, yo, check this out, or here's that, or here's $1,000, right? Or how can I help? Or let me invest in one of your tech projects. So you're dealing with a different class of individuals, as opposed to, for example, the type of information I'm going to present today is going to get half the engagement I usually get. But that half engagement are people who are definitely interested in the conspiracy of money and war and want to learn. And these are better people. People who want to learn are better people. People who want to just come on the internet and be entertained are not great people. Are there moments where you should be entertained? Absolutely. But if 80-20 rule. 80% of what you do should be for the benefit of self. 20% should be for entertainment. I'm more like 90 to 5, 99 to 1, because half the things I do for fun are actually to make myself productive, right? Like, fun for me is laying down watching chess openings, right? Like on YouTube. Like, that's how I go to sleep to. I go to sleep to documentaries, right? That's fun for me. Fun for me is training my kids, right? Coaching my kids' team. That's my fun. That's what I get out of fun. So, is there that one moment where I'm watching like 50 Cent's Power? Yes, love it. Where 2 episodes we just missed the past 2 weeks of the holidays, I'm upset. 50, I need another episode of Power. So there is that opportunity for entertainment. I watched Doctor Strange the other night. I watched the new Matrix. So there's that opportunity. But we have to play the 80-20 rule. And most people playing the 80-20 rule on the wrong side, where 80% of their life is spent on entertainment, and then 20% isn't even their choosing, it's forced, right? Either their teachers are forcing them to study, or their boss is forcing them to work, or their life circumstances are forcing them to study and work. How many people are choosing, I want to study right now? That's what I do. Like last night, I literally was like, I'm like dead sleep. I don't feel like watching chess videos. What am I going to do? I'll study this book I never finished. So I'm falling asleep studying a book, right? Like, so we have to like re-engineer our lives and create these systems that allow us to be more productive individuals. But yeah.
We talked earlier about making trade-off choices, about the challenge of, okay, if you want, you could leave the system, you could homestead, you could go to another country. And what I notice in my own life is that I have to make those choices in a focused way, one at a time, where I'm going to go, okay, I'm like this month or this period, I'm going to focus on making a different trade-off around food, or a different trade-off around this aspect of my finances.
Yeah.
Or, one, because trying to do them all at once, like if to go from living fully in the system to living fully out of the system, it's difficult for most people. It's like taking someone who's 400 pounds and telling them, all right, we're going to train for the marathon. And like, you kind of have to work towards that. So I'm curious if you have a method or found something that's worked for you and the people you know in terms of making those trade-offs and making them in a way that allows you to keep making those choices, or is sustainable, or helps get someone slowly from maybe the default choices that society has created to ones that benefit them more.
Yeah. So while I'm training the kids, we usually turn on some sort of mindset video. So it might be Marcus Aurelius or some video about setting habits and dopamine or whatever. So one day I was watching the Kobe situation, and Kobe was talking about how he became a superstar. And he said one summer he didn't make a single bucket, didn't score. Kobe Bryant, young kid, never scored the entire summer. Crazy. So he talked about how he would compartmentalize his game. So he say, every 6 months I would work on something different. So the first 6 months was like, I'm just going to work on shooting. That's it. Then the next 6 months was like, all right, I'm just going to work on shooting, but off the dribble, right? So instead of trying to learn everything or practice everything, he just practiced one thing until that thing became sharp, right? And that's how I operate. And since seeing that, I love knowing that I'm reassured in the way I do things. So that's the type of system I put in place, where we're just going to do this for this month, and once I get good at it, then we go to the next thing. And I'm like super laser focused like that, because sometimes I can get distracted and do too many different things. So I like to set, certain hobbies. Like right now, it's hablo español and playing chess. Right, like these are two things that I have to master. Chess is obviously a lifetime mastery, so that's not going anywhere. And then it's just like also fitting in writing, because I'm writing this book, so fitting in writing in my day, training the kids, studying, and YouTubing. So and then trying to stay fit, right? Because I'm at a desk all the time. It's like fitness is something that it comes and goes with me. Like I'll go like compartmentalizing. I'll go 3 months. Like I know, like for example, last year I had the Masculinity conference with Donovan Sharp. All these guys got muscles. And at the time, I was like, I was just skinny, So I hit the gym for 3 months straight just so I could have muscles for the conference. You know what I'm saying? And then, like, after that, it's like I slack off. And then I caught COVID, so I lost a bunch of weight. So it's like now I have to just pick myself back up, get myself back on a 3-month thing. And I know I can build myself to a muscular level in 3 months. The problem is knowing what you can do and your capabilities sometimes causes you to procrastinate. So right now I'm in a procrastination stage as far as fitness is concerned, because I'm like, at any moment I can just get up and just gain 30 pounds because I just have great genetics, right? So sometimes I'll delay, but it's hard to fit everything into your life, so you have to prioritize. What makes most sense, what is most imperative right now, and let's do that. I have a book coming out. I'm not going to tell you the title because I don't want somebody stealing it, but it's going to tell you how to organize your life to become like the supreme individual.
Well, you mentioned in there training the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well, the kids, they play soccer. My dad's from Jamaica, so I was raised on this sport. I played this sport my whole life, or I should say my whole youth life, and I was really damn good. So I have twin boys. I coach their team, and they're the best on their team. It consists of 40 minutes of hardcore cardio, and then about 40 minutes of ball training. Cardio being the most important. When they're done, they're like, oh, I got a cramp. I feel like I got to vomit, that type of situation. But we had a game Sunday, and then, you look at them versus all the other kids out there, and they're like, pew, 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 and the other kids are like, so it's reassuring, right? Because now they understand why they were training. When they see how they outperform everyone, so when they come back and train, they're like, yeah, let's get it, when we talk about masculinity, manosphere, red pill, whatever these people want to call it, a man's goal is to replace himself. A man's goal is to find an heir, right? Going back to the whole monarchy situation. So also ego, man wants to live forever. The only way to really live forever is through children. So my gift to the world are amazing people, the amazing people I create. So I'm creating these amazing individuals who have a certain moral values and ethics. Hopefully, if I do it right. But we go hard at the sports, man. We go hard.
You mentioned homeschooling earlier as a big value, and that's definitely a value that I share. Mm-hmm. I did an earlier episode with someone who mentioned that the amount of homeschoolers in America has increased from 2 to 10% during COVID. And so I'm curious what you guys do around homeschooling. What sort of, are there ways that you're bringing other people together, or do you have like a homeschooling pod, or what's the process there?
Yeah, so this is a project in its infancy stages. So I can't tell you too much about what this will be 10 years from now. I can only tell you what we have now. Although 10 years from now, I'm picturing some amazing things happening. I'm picturing like actual homeschool pods, right? With the Hotep style curriculum and way of teaching. We're not there yet. Right now it's about showing how it's done. So we have an individual who is on a team. She homeschooled 5 kids. They're all super successful. One of them was like one of two at this prestigious university to get the a scholarship, and it was like only two people in the nation got the scholarship out of thousands that applied. So she was very successful. Her and her husband were very successful with homeschooling, and she's helping us put together this program. And she's on our ass, and I love it because she's like, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna do it right, and we're gonna be honest with people, and we're gonna show them, da da da. So she's really, we have a coordinator. Shout out to Dawn. Dawn Hotep is our coordinator, and we have India helping us out, who has experience homeschooling. So we're putting together. We may have a curriculum at some point, but really what we're doing is we're showing people how to create the curriculum, how to manage the curriculum, how to manage your time. And a big focus, what she says is style, right? She uses the word style because not everyone learns the same. And the benefit of homeschooling is saying that everybody doesn't in the class doesn't have to get homework the same way, right? Like she mentioned before, with one child, it was take this clock apart. And with another child, it was like build something, right? So it depends on how you learn that she was giving the homework assignments out. Some people are more auditory and some people are more visual. So you can teach differently based upon, people's styles. So, we lay out how to identify how your child learns in different styles. And, of course, the regulations, state by state regulations, explaining how pods work, so on and so forth. But really what we're doing is going to empower people with information at first. Secondly, hold events where people can gather and learn from her. And then produce content, some video content to help people remotely. And then last stage, I'm, just shooting the shit right now, but maybe some Hotep curriculum and Hotep pods, man. Financed, like fully financed.
Yeah. What does Hotep curriculum look like? What does that mean?
Hotep curriculum is values over academics, ethics over academics, morals over academics. Right now, we can teach a child about English two different ways. When you learn English, they hand you books. The books you read can influence your behavior.
Definitely.
Because you can see how these characters are interacting with each other. Now, if there's a book in there and they got same-sex relationships and you ain't with that, and the child is 5 years old, technically in this English book, they can sneak that in there. So it's about creating an environment conducive with the values that you have. If you like LGBT, then maybe you need to teach your child English based upon them LGBT books. If I don't believe in that, maybe I need books that got heterosexual relationships. Just one example. This is just one example of morals and ethics. You can have a book where there's war. You can have a book where there's peace. Through how you teach the subjects. For example, you say, Mary had 8 apples, John took 5. Right? This is math. You're teaching them how to add and subtract, but you also taught them that John could take something from another person. This is theft. You just taught this child theft. That's different from saying, John asked Mary to borrow 4 eggs. If she says yes, if she obliges, how many does he have? You see how you... So the Hotep curriculum is very much about being focused on the values and morals and ethics of the family, and then structuring the education materials based upon that. Otherwise, you corrupt a child's mind. They can know all the English in the world, all the math in the world, but they're a corrupt child.
I know some in my audience are going to get a little upset with the example you used, but I grew up going to Christian schools. So I'm very familiar with the idea that, that education can communicate certain value systems. And I think in part that awareness came from going to schools that taught a different value system. than the public education model.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware, even as a kid, I was aware what I'm learning here is different than what most people in the world are being taught.
Yeah.
And I still got all the information. Actually, I should say every now and then I read a book, a scholarly adult book about history, and realize how little in schooling I was taught about a certain historical event. But I did get all the same basic information, even in that environment.
You know what's also key? The educator. Like, for me, this is why it's so hard for me to homeschool, because I don't want a woman to teach my boys, and I don't want an effeminate man to teach my boys, because body language is an education in itself. How people deal with emotions is an education within itself, and this is all learned on the subconscious level. How an individual deals with frustration. See, a masculine man deals with frustration differently from a woman. Deals with it differently from an effeminate man. I don't want my boys picking up effeminate traits from a woman when dealing with their emotions. And this is things we talk about in the Hotep community, where 90% of and this is just a factoid that needs to be fact checked, but 90% of people are taught by women. So that means all the boys, 90% of boys are being taught by women, right?
I talk about that in my next book, actually.
See what I'm saying?
The fact that the majority of people in the education system are women, or in positions of authority in the education system.
This is what I'm saying. So, and you're probably talking about something different than I am. I'm talking about,
I totally different.
Yeah, and I can't wait to read that either. But these are the effects that I'm concerned about, right? I think boys should be taught by men, and women should be taught by women, and because they're going to pick up things off individuals subconsciously. I don't want to go too adept to it because there's a lot of thinking that I haven't done on it yet, but I'm really sure.
You're reminding me of there's a book that I read before becoming a parent that was really helpful to me, called The Continuum Concept.
Okay.
And that book is by someone who went down to I forget what area of the world, but there was I think it might have been Peru, but there were basically local tribes there who were still living the same style of life that they had for thousands of years. And she talked about how the way that they raised the children learned, was very different than in the modern industrial world. And that basically kids learned everything they needed to by watching and observing the adults, not by having someone sit down with them and go through a book and tell them how it was supposed to be. They actually just learned by watching. And that if you keep your kids close, if you have basically what we would call now attachment parenting with them, where you're allowing them to get all of the attention that they need as infants, and then allowing them as they become older, when they want to go away from the parent to explore, to do dangerous things on their own, or things that we might in the modern world frame as dangerous, that's okay, and allowing them to do that. And so what your adults are describing there is what's known as modeling, which I think kids are really good at doing, where they look at someone and they break down not just what they're learning from the intellectual verbal aspect, from the
educator,
all of the things the person is doing, all of their behavior. And I know someone who became aware of this and ended up taking his kids out of daycare, because when he would send his kids to daycare, they would come back learning to speak English with a Spanish accent, because the daycare workers were all Hispanic and his family wasn't. Yeah. And he was like, wait a minute, this is not going to help them in the environment that I'm going to be putting them into as adults. They should, if they're growing up in America, have an American accent, and that's going to put them at a disadvantage. And so he ended up pulling them out of daycare because of that. So I understand what you're describing, that kids are not always learning just on an intellectual level. They're learning on all sorts of other unconscious levels as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very hard because there's just not masculine men in education. They just don't exist. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's hard for me to homeschool. I don't have the time to do it myself. But I'm trying to figure out how to make the transition. India's on my neck. She's like, Hotep, you can't be out here telling people to homeschool and you don't homeschool your kids. And I'm like, I want to, but I got boys. And I can't just let any old man, do it, and morals and ethics. But I'm also like, I'm very picky and indecisive in many ways. So, but we'll get there.
Well, it sounds like you're someone who has very high standards for
Yeah.
the way that children are taught.
Yeah.
And for you to live up to your own standards requires, it sounds like, an amount of time and focus that is really significant. And like we were talking about earlier, you can only do so many of those at once.
Yeah. Yeah. The alternative is military school.
Why military school?
Why not?
Just because of the level of masculinity in those institutions? Is that the idea?
It's the lack of comfort. Too much comfort. How does it go? Comfort breeds weak nations, that whole quote phrase.
I've heard that saying, yeah.
So it's just like sometimes with boys, you need to put them in environments where they're not comfortable. All people, right? Like I do this thing where I sleep on the couch, right? I don't afford myself to sleep in the bed every single night because it makes me uncomfortable. And then I work harder. It reminds me like, you got to work harder. You're still sleeping on the couch. So like I force myself into uncomfortable situations.
Chosen discomfort.
Yeah. So that's why I like military school, because it's just like, it would be like, I really just want to put them in there for like a semester so they can come back and appreciate what they have. Like, Dad, don't ever send me back there. I'm like, I could. See how life could be different? Yeah. But I think people need to have situations where they're put in uncomfortable situations, and they might appreciate America more.
What's the discomfort that you've chosen in your own life that you feel like you've gotten the most benefit out of?
Sleeping on the couch. Sleeping on the couch is wonderful because the proximity to my desk, right? Like, for example, if I'm in my bed and I think of something that I have to do on the computer, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go all the way downstairs. When I'm on the couch, the computer's right there, So I can just get up and walk over there, do whatever I gotta do in like 2 minutes, and it's done. So like that need for procrastination or that desire for procrastination disappears. Just being able to get right up and get right to it is a huge advantage.
One of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of education and raising kids is the intention behind it. Because I am a big fan of the writing of John Taylor Gatto, who talks about how the intention behind the United States education system was basically to produce industrial workers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious for you and for your sort of educational experiments you're doing, what is the intention behind it? What is it if your kids go through this and it's the best version ever, what is it you hope they get out of it?
Out of the education?
Mm-hmm.
Morals, values, and ethics.
What does that mean, though?
What does that mean? That's a good question. Character can save your life. Character will save your life. A lot of people are dead because of their ego. Simply because of their ego. Just because of their ego, people are dead. They thought too highly of themselves, overestimated themselves, right? Talked to somebody the wrong way. Like Coach EO tells this story where he says he was yapping off at the mouth, drunk at some dude, and I think he was like on the second floor roof, and the guy threw him off, so he broke his arm, and he had to go get like surgery. But he could have died if he fell on his head, right? So like he had to brush with death, all because his character wasn't in place, right? So having a lack of character can put you in some really odd situations. My ego landed me, I got arrested a few times because I was being a jerk. You know what I mean? So humility, a good mix of humility with confidence, it has to be mastered. And when you have strong morals and ethics, those things ground you. This is where you ground your humility, right? What are your ethics? What is the least significant death to you? If I squashed a bug right now, would you say, oh, it was just a bug? Or would you say, damn, we just lost a life? That's where your ethics start for me, right? When there's a wasp in the house or a bug in the house and I kill it, I say a prayer. I say a prayer. I go, yo, look, I didn't mean to take him out, but wifey in here, she don't like it. And when I can, I catch them and I release them. Bugs. I catch them and I release them when I can. I was at somebody's house in the basement, and it was a salamander in the basement. And they're like, oh, my God, salamander, get it. And they're like trying to swipe at it with the broom. I picked it up and took it outside with my hand. I've never picked up a salamander before. But in that moment, I saw something about to die. And I said, no, we have to preserve life. So I picked up that salamander and I took it outside. Now, if I saw a snake, I don't know, like, he just going to have to die. Okay? So these are the things. It's like, what type of life, is deserving to you, right? And these are where your ethics come in. So if you believe that, killing a plant is wrong, then you for more than likely you wouldn't want to see death in your life of another human being or so on and so forth, of an animal or anything. Do you care about the animals that die? Or do you say it's cool that we kill pigs and cows, but you better not kill that dog, right? So it's like, what makes a dog's life more special than a dog and a pig, right? Or a chicken, right? So like, where are we as a society when it relates to death? But that is really going to dictate the character of your society. That's what's wrong with our society now. There's a hierarchy of life, right? One type of life takes precedent over another. Even within the animal kingdom, a pig's life is not as important as a dog's life. A cow's life is expendable for our life. This is sort of the egocentric problems with humanity. If we thought on a playing field, or we thought more, I hate the word equality, but if we had some humanity, if humanity had humanity, we could save humanity.
By the way, should I assume from this that you are vegan or vegetarian?
No, I had a cheeseburger yesterday, and I had a chicken sandwich.
Okay.
No, I had a Chick-fil-A sandwich yesterday. No, I'm a hypocrite.
Okay.
I'm a philosophical hypocrite. I mean, are we all? Would I like to be? At one point, I was a vegan. Would I like to be? Absolutely, I would. It's very difficult. Eventually, I'll go back to that lifestyle because I truly believe that's the best lifestyle for me.
But why? So if you believe it's the best, why not do it now?
I'm weak.
Okay.
I'm weak. That cheeseburger just tastes too
appreciate
good.
the honesty of that answer. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just weak. It's just like, I don't feel like giving up this cheeseburger right now. It just, I don't feel like giving up this fried chicken right now, even though it's killing me. Like, this is the hypocritical things we do as human beings, right? We compartmentalize our life and say, I'll get to this at some point in my life, but I'm getting up there now, so I have to start thinking about my health, right? So, at some point I'm going to get back into it, hopefully sooner than later. But it just comes back to human weakness.
But before we finish, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you were really hoping to talk about? Anything you want to make sure that we get to?
Subscribe to my YouTube channel, man. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and join my lectures, man, Monday through Friday. Anything I want to say, I say there. I can't think of anything now. I think we covered a great deal of what I'm passionate about.
And this is always my last question is, where can people find you online? Where should they follow?
Yeah.
Where should they go next?
Yeah, whatever you do, just don't Google me. Now everybody's gonna go Google Hotep Jesus.
That's the bet. I can tell you're a marketer, because if you wanted people to Google you, that was the way to do it.
I actually don't. They wrote some mean things about me, and untrue things as well. But hey, that's leftist media. YouTube, Twitter, follow the movement, HotepNation.com. Yeah, man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on and chatting with me. Anything else you want to add before we finish up?
Absolute pleasure, man. That's it, man. I'll catch you on the next rerun.
All right. Thanks again.
All right, bro.
Thank you for listening to the Brendon Marotta Show. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else who would also like it, and then go on whatever platform you listen to the show on and leave a positive review. If you want to support the show directly, go to BrendonMarotta.com/show and subscribe there. Paid subscribers get special unreleased bonus material and live events that are only available to them. Once again, that is BrendonMarotta.com/show. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you all later.